Hi, my name is Lori Anderson, and I'm the owner and designer of Southern Stitches and Brer Rabbit Designs. And we have been working on the Smocked Bishop tutorial. And if you missed the last thing that we did with the bishop was the placket. The instructions for that are on my blog. I didn't do a video tutorial for that one, but I'm going to show you a few things about it. There's a few questions that I have gotten from a few people about taking out the pleating threads, and so I wanted to show you my placket right here. Before I sewed this placket in, I removed almost all of my holding row threads. I always leave the top row of smocking, the holding row, in. I don't remove that. I did, and I left in the top actual holding row that we pleated up when this was pleated up. The reason I leave in, and I'm going to show you this right here, you can see that black thread there, right up here. That is in the very first row of smocking. I leave that one in because it makes it a little bit easier when you want to pull up your bias neck, to add your bias neck binding. I am also going to put this in my sewing machine, and I'm going to run a stitch across the top of this because that's going to guide me to making sure that my bias neck binding is up tight to this top row of smocking. If you're just joining me in this series, go back to the very beginning. You can find my videos on YouTube, or you can find them on my website, or you can find them on my blog. You can go on my blog and you can do a search for Smocked Bishops, and it will take you back to the very beginning of this lesson series. Okay, the bias strip, I've cut my piece. This Smocked Bishop is a 12-month size, and the bias strip that needed to be cut is 11 inches long by 1 inch wide. And my next step is going to be taking my bishop dress to my sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch a long stitch, a gathering stitch, just above this top row of smocking. That is going to give me a guide for when I pin this on, and I'll be able to see. Otherwise, when you would pin on your bias neck and you would stitch on the other side or either side, you can't see real good to be able to butt your stitches up real close to that top row. If you run a stitch line on your sewing machine, that will be a good guide for you. So that's my next step. I wanted to show you up real close again my placket. That's it. I just folded this side back, was hand whip stitched. This side is just folded back. So we're going to take this to the machine, and I am going to run a stitching line up close to that top row of smocking, and I will show you what that looks like. I have finished my top basting row that I have stitched over the first row of my smocking, and I'm going to give you a close-up view of that. It's going to be a little difficult to see because I used white thread. If I was making this for just this tutorial, I would have used a colored thread to, so that you could see this a little bit better. But I have used white thread, and I'm going to bring this up close to the camera so that maybe you can pick this up and see. I stitched a basting row just above that top cable row that you see there. That basting row is our guideline for when we stitch on our bias strip. It makes it a little bit easier to be able to see and to get that bias binding on straight so that you don't have wobbly gaps between your pleats and between your bias neck band and the top row of smocking. You want that to butt up real nice and close to it. So that is what I have just done, is I have stitched a top basting row. I've left in my guide rows. I have not pulled those out. Those won't come out until I get my bias neck band stitched on. So that's a close-up where you hopefully can see that top basting row right smack dab over the top of your cable row on the very first row of smocking. The next step for applying your bias neck band is to take your bias neck band, and I have folded it in half, and I have finger pressed the center of my band. And I am going to be working from the center out. I'm going to match the center up of my band to the center of my smocked bishop. I'm going to start at center, and I'm going to start pinning it all the way around, and I'm going to pin it so that my ends are going to overlap just a tad. And I'm going to get this pinned, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, I have pinned on my bias neck band, and as you can see, I use a lot of pins. And another tip that I have for you is you have your top holding row that you put in when you pleated your fabric. I line up the very top edge of my bias band to that holding row. That helps me to get my band on straight. So the very top little edge here of my band is lined up to my holding row, which my holding row is white thread, so it's not going to show up very well. But that is how I've pinned on my bias neck binding. And like I said, I use a lot of pins because I want my band to go on as straight as possible. Over here on the end, I have brought out my neck band has extended beyond the placket of my dress. You want to do this. Extend it by about 1/4 of an inch. And the next step is going to be to take this to your sewing machine, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch on the back side. That's what's going to be up in my machine. And I know my pins are on the other way to pull out. I'm just going to be reaching under here to pull my pins out as I stitch. The reason why I'm going to stitch on the back side is because this this basting stitch that we did over that top row of smocking is my guideline to follow as I stitch on this band, and that will aid me in getting this band so that it's stitched on right at the top of that top row of smocking, and your band is going to have no gaps between the band and the stitching. You want the band in your smocking. You want that band to go on so that it's nice and straight across that top row. I'm now going to take it to my sewing machine, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to stitch it on with a long basting stitch, and then I'm going to look at it and see if it looks good before I go over it again with my final stitch. The reason why I do a basting stitch first is because it will show me where I can flip that band up, I can look and see if there's any places there that have some gaps and that those gaps need to be fixed or adjusted with my pins. So I'm going to stitch a long basting stitch, and then I'm going to take a look at it. I'm going to stitch that, I'm going to show it to you, and then we'll proceed.